7. Brutal Stoic laws to build an unshakable mindset. Let's be honest, you don't need more motivation. Motivation is cheap. It comes and it goes. What you need are rules, steel pillars for your mind when everything else feels like it's falling apart. Maybe you've been living in quiet defeat, not because you lack talent, but because your mind has never been properly commanded. It reacts instead of leads. It bends to the will of others, to the pressure of the moment, to the whisper of cheap comfort. It's a ship without a captain, tossed in a storm of distraction and self-doubt. And that hollow feeling you get at the end of the day, that's the price you pay for an untrained mind. Today, we change that. This isn't about feeling better, it's about becoming stronger. We're going to walk through 7 brutal Stoic laws that aren't meant to comfort you, but to forge you into someone who is simply unshakable. There's a story of a man, maybe a man just like you, who felt like a ghost in his own life. He'd sit in meetings, nodding, while his mind was screaming. He'd scroll through the highlight reels of other people's lives, feeling his own grow dimmer. He made promises to himself in the dead of night to wake up earlier, to speak his mind, to stop procrastinating, only to break them at the first sign of daylight. His weakness wasn't a lack of desire, it was a lack of inner architecture. His mind was built on sand. One day, exhausted by his own fragility, he stumbled upon the ancient teachings of the Stoics, not the passive, academic philosophy he imagined, but a raw, practical war manual for the mind. He discovered men like Marcus Aurelius, an emperor ruling the most powerful empire on earth while battling war, plague, and betrayal, who still found the strength to command his inner world. He learned of Epictetus, a man born a slave, who found a freedom no master could ever take away, the freedom of a disciplined mind. And he read Seneca, a man of immense wealth who intentionally practiced poverty to ensure he was the master of his fortune, not its slave. This man decided to stop wishing for strength and start building it. He began a journey to adopt 7 of their most demanding laws. These aren't gentle suggestions. They are brutal, uncompromising principles designed to strip away weakness and forge an unshakable mindset. And today, we walk that same path with him. Law 1. Embrace discomfort like a friend. The first and most punishing law the man adopted was this: stop running from hardship and start seeking it out. The Stoics knew a secret that our modern world has desperately tried to forget. Comfort breeds weakness. Ease makes you fragile. A life without friction creates a mind that shatters at the first sign of trouble. Seneca advised, set aside a certain number of days, during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself the while, is this the condition that I feared? The man started small. He began taking cold showers. The first time, his body screamed in protest. His mind invented a dozen reasons why this was a foolish, unnecessary act. It was the voice of weakness, the voice of comfort, begging him to return to the cage he'd always known. But he stayed under the icy water, breathing through the shock. He wasn't just enduring the cold, he was training his mind to override its own frantic impulses. He was teaching it that he was in command, not his fleeting feelings. Soon, he applied this principle everywhere. He started waking up an hour earlier, not to be more productive, but just to sit with the discomfort of quiet stillness before the world demanded his attention. At work, instead of avoiding the difficult conversation with an underperforming colleague, he initiated it. He felt that familiar knot of anxiety in his stomach, but this time he recognized it not as a signal to retreat, but as a signpost pointing toward growth. This is the first brutal law. You must willingly step into the arena of discomfort. It builds resilience and proves that what you fear is almost always worse in your head than in reality. Your action step is this. For the next 7 days, do one thing every single day that makes you uncomfortable. Take the cold shower, fast for a morning, have the conversation you've been avoiding. Don't do it for the outcome, do it for the training. Your affirmation is, discomfort is my training ground. Law 2. Stop being a slave to emotion. The man used to believe his emotions were undeniable truths. If he felt anger, someone had wronged him. If he felt fear, there was a genuine threat. His days were a chaotic sea of reactions, his mood dictated by emails, comments from his boss, or the traffic on his commute. Then he learned the second brutal law, a cornerstone of Epictetus's teaching. It is not events that disturb us, but our judgment of them. Anger, fear, and despair don't come from the outside world. They are born inside your own mind. Epictetus taught that any person capable of angering you becomes your master. He can anger you only when you permit yourself to be disturbed by him. The man began to practice the sacred pause. When his boss sent a terse, one-line email that would have previously sent him into a spiral of anxiety, he stopped, he breathed. He looked at the email and applied the law. The event itself was neutral, just a few words on a screen, the story he was telling himself. He's angry with me, my job is at risk, I've failed, was his own creation. It was a choice. He started to see his emotions not as masters, but as messengers. Sometimes they carried useful information. Often they were just noise, the echoes of old insecurities and untrained impulses. By pausing, he created a space between the trigger and his response. In that space, he found his power. He could feel the first flush of anger, acknowledge it, and then choose a calm, rational reply. He could feel the pull of procrastination, see it for the fear of failure it was, and choose to act anyway. This is the second brutal law. Your emotions are not your masters unless you let them be. Emotional control isn't about being cold or robotic. It's about achieving inner tranquility so the chaos of the world cannot disturb your peace. Your action step. For the next week, whenever you feel a strong negative emotion, anger, jealousy, anxiety, stop. Name the feeling. Then ask yourself, is this emotion useful or is it just my judgment talking? Your affirmation is, I feel deeply, but I choose wisely. Law 3. Let go of fairness. Of all the laws, this was the hardest for the man to accept. He was obsessed with fairness. He kept a meticulous mental ledger of every perceived injustice, the promotion he deserved but didn't get, the recognition a colleague stole, the simple courtesies he extended but never received in return. This constant scorekeeping made him bitter and fragile. The third brutal law, inspired by the life of Marcus Aurelius, was a dagger to the heart of his resentment. The world owes you nothing. Stop expecting fairness. Marcus, who dealt with constant betrayal and ingratitude, wrote about how we are meant to work together, not harm one another. He recognized that while we should strive to act justly, expecting the world to be just in return is a recipe for misery. Life isn't fair. It never has been. Good people suffer, cheaters win, chaos reigns. The man realized his demand for fairness was a form of profound arrogance. It was the belief that the universe should conform to his personal moral code. By letting go of this expression, he wasn't condoning injustice. He was liberating himself from the emotional prison it created. When a project he'd poured his heart into was handed to someone else, the old him would have seethed for weeks. The new him felt the sting of disappointment, but his next thought was not, "This is so unfair." It was, "What now?" He shifted his focus from the injustice he couldn't control to the actions he could. He could support his teammate, analyze what he learned from the project, and apply that knowledge to his next task with even greater excellence. He stopped being a victim of circumstance and became a student of reality. This is the third brutal law. To demand fairness from an indifferent universe is to set yourself up for a life of resentment. True strength is found in accepting reality and acting with virtue anyway. Your action step. The next time you feel wronged, consciously refuse to dwell on the injustice. Instead, immediately ask yourself, what is my next right action? Shift your energy from complaint to purpose. Your affirmation is, I don't expect fairness. I train for reality. Law 4. Focus only on what you can control. The man's mind was a scattered mess. He worried about the economy, about what others thought of him, about past mistakes, and about a future that hadn't happened. His mental energy was hemorrhaging into 1,000 black holes, none of which he had any power over. The fourth brutal law, the very essence of Stoic practice, brought him home. It's the dichotomy of control, taught by Epictetus. Some things are up to us, and some things are not. The only things truly in our power are our own judgments, our impulses, our desires, our aversions, in a word, our own actions. Everything else, our health, our reputation, the actions of others, the outcome of our efforts, is ultimately beyond our control. This wasn't a passive philosophy of resignation. It was a brutally efficient operating system for life. The man took out a piece of paper and drew a line down the middle. On one side, he wrote, "Things I control." On the other, "Things I don't." Under "Things I don't," he listed, my boss's final decision, whether the client says yes, how my colleagues perceive me, the stock market's performance. Under "Things I control," he wrote, the quality of the proposal I submit, the effort I put into my presentation, treating my colleagues with respect, my investment strategy. Looking at the two lists was a revelation. He had been spending 90% of his energy on the second list and only 10% on the first. He was trying to steer the weather while letting the rudder on his own ship swing wildly. From that day on, he became ruthless in his focus. Before any task, he would ask himself, what part of this is in my power? That is where he would pour all his effort. He couldn't guarantee success, but he could guarantee his own excellence. He couldn't control whether people liked him, but he could control whether he acted with integrity. This singular focus brought a profound sense of peace and power. The chaos of the world still raged, but he had found his anchor. This is the fourth brutal law. Stop wasting a single drop of energy on things you cannot influence. Your power lies not in controlling the world, but in controlling yourself. Your action step. Make your own 2-column list. Be brutally honest about what you do and do not control. For 1 week, whenever you feel anxious or frustrated, consult your list and consciously shift your focus back to your column. Your affirmation is, I focus on what I can control. The rest is not mine to carry. Law 5. Choose hardship before life does. The man, like most of us, had structured his life around avoiding pain. He sought comfortable routines, predictable pleasures, and safe choices. His mind had become like an overprotected muscle, smooth, untested, and weak. It was terrified of the inevitable hardships of life because it had no training for them. The fifth brutal law, championed by Seneca, was a direct assault on this weakness. Practice voluntary hardship to inoculate yourself against involuntary misfortune. Seneca, despite his vast wealth, would regularly sleep on the floor, eat stale bread, and wear his worst clothes, not as a punishment, but as a vaccine. He was teaching his body and mind that he could endure. He was preparing for fate's inevitable blows. The man realized he didn't have to wait for a crisis to build strength. He could forge it himself, on his own terms. He began to intentionally inject small, controlled doses of hardship into his life. He started intermittent fasting, training his body to handle hunger without panic. He would occasionally leave his phone at home for a day, forcing himself to be present and to sit with the feeling of boredom, breaking his addiction to constant stimulation. He learned that discipline isn't about self-punishment, it's about self-respect. Every time he chose the harder path, he cast a vote for the stronger version of himself. He was no longer just a man who hoped he could handle adversity. He was a man who knew he could because he had practiced. He had rehearsed for failure, for loss, for discomfort. When a real crisis eventually hit, a sudden job loss, it was still painful, but it was not terrifying. The ground beneath his feet was solid because he had built it himself. This is the fifth brutal law. Don't wait for life to test you. Test yourself. Build your resilience in times of peace, so you are unbreakable in times of war. Your action step. This week, choose one comfort and voluntarily give it up for a set period. It could be hot water, your favorite food, or social media for an evening. As you do it, repeat Seneca's question to yourself. Is this the condition that I feared? Your affirmation is, I don't wait for hardship, I train for it. Law 6. Detach from outcomes. Love the process. The man was addicted to praise. He lived for the well done from his boss, the like on social media, the successful outcome of a project. His self-worth was a roller coaster, soaring on the peaks of validation and crashing in the valleys of failure. He wasn't in control, the results were. The sixth brutal law taught him to reclaim his power by shifting his focus from the prize to the practice. The Stoics called it loving the process. Think of the Stoic archer. Her goal is to hit the target, but she knows that once the arrow leaves the bow, it's out of her control. A sudden gust of wind, a flaw in the arrow, these things are not up to her. So, where does she place her focus? On everything she can control, her stance, her grip, her breathing, her aim. She pours all her excellence into the process. If she does this, she has succeeded, regardless of where the arrow lands. The man started to apply this to his own work. His job was no longer about getting the promotion. It was about becoming the kind of professional who deserved one. He fell in love with the process of deep work, of crafting elegant emails, of leading his team with virtue. He found joy not in the applause, but in the discipline itself. This detachment from the outcome had a paradoxical effect. It made him more effective. Without the anxiety of needing a specific result, he became more present, more creative, and more resilient. Failure lost its sting. A failed project was no longer a verdict on his worth. It was simply feedback, an arrow that missed, providing data for the next shot. Success lost its intoxicating power. It was no longer a source of ego, but simply the welcome result of a process well executed. This is the sixth brutal law. Your value doesn't lie in the result, it lies in your effort. Anchor your identity in your discipline, not in the unpredictable tides of external validation. Your action step. Choose one important task this week. Before you begin, define what a successful process looks like, independent of the result. Focus all your energy on executing that process with absolute excellence. When you're done, judge yourself on the quality of your effort, not the outcome. Your affirmation is, my value lies in my discipline, not in results. Law 7. Remember death and live fully. The man lived as if he had infinite time. He wasted hours on pointless distractions, put off important conversations, and saved his real life for some far-off future when everything would be perfect. He was living in a state of perpetual someday. The final and most brutal law snapped him awake. Memento mori. Remember, you must die. The Stoics didn't meditate on death to be morbid. They did it to find life. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." It wasn't a threat, it was a clarifying agent. It strips away the trivial, the petty, and the pointless, leaving only what truly matters. The man began to practice this. Each morning, he would take a moment to confront his own mortality. He would ask himself, if this were my last day on earth, would I be content with what I have planned? Would I be proud of the person I'm about to be? The question was a powerful filter. It dissolved his fear of taking small risks. It silenced his urge to procrastinate. It gave him the courage to tell people he loved them. The thought of death didn't make his life feel meaningless. It made every single moment feel infinitely precious. He stopped wasting his breath on petty arguments. He stopped scrolling mindlessly through feeds that left him feeling empty. He started writing the book he'd always dreamed of. He started being present with his family. He started living. This is the seventh brutal law. Your time is the only currency you truly possess, and it's running out. Don't use this truth to despair. Use it to ignite your life with purpose and urgency. Your action step. For 1 week, start each day with the memento mori reflection. Place a small object on your desk, a coin, a stone, to remind you of life's impermanence. When you find yourself wasting time or avoiding something important, touch the object and remember that your time is not guaranteed. Your affirmation is, I live as if time is borrowed, because it is. Conclusion. The journey of the man didn't end with him becoming a superhero. He still felt fear. He still had bad days. The chaos of the world did not cease, but something fundamental inside him had been reforged. His mind was no longer a house built of sand, but a fortress built of stone. The winds of fate still blew, but he was no longer at their mercy. He had become unshakable. You now have the blueprints for that same fortress. The law of discomfort, to build your resilience. The law of emotional control, to reclaim your inner peace. The law of unfairness, to free you from resentment. The law of control, to focus your power. The law of voluntary hardship, to prepare you for crisis. The law of process, to ground your self-worth in your own effort. And the law of memento mori, to fill your life with urgency and meaning. These laws aren't easy. They are a daily practice, a lifelong commitment to commanding your own mind. They are a declaration of war against the weakness, distraction, and fragility of the modern world. The power of these laws only comes alive when you practice them. Thinking about them is useless. You have to live them. So here's my challenge to you. Starting today, choose just one of these 7 brutal laws. Don't just think about it. Commit to it for the next 7 days. Test yourself. Observe how you respond when temptation pulls, when fear whispers, when comfort calls, and then come back and share your experience in the comments below. Tell us which law you chose and what you discovered. You'll discover something crucial. Your mind isn't weak. It has never been weak. It has simply never been properly commanded. This is your chance to step into the role of commander. Not of the world, not of others, but of yourself. That is the only power that truly matters, and the only one no one can ever take from you.